Little bit of a different format of video today. I want to talk about AI, which I know everyone is talking about right now, and that's sort of the point. VO3 released a few days ago, and there have been some amazing examples of what it can do as far as creating live action content. That is, what appears to be humans in realistic environments. I'm not an AI, by the way. Or am I? And that's sort of what a lot of discussion has been around. Not only can we tell what's real and what's fake, but humans are going to be replaced by AI in media. In other words, actors are going to be out of work, sound technicians are going to be out of work, lighting, gaffers, everyone in the industry is going to be out of work because everything is going to be AI generated. And that is as may be, and it sucks. Look, I work in the tech industry. I'm a software developer, at least in part, and software developers are being replaced by AI in the industry. It's already happening with, varying degrees of success depending on the company. But these are problems that, while they absolutely suck for the people affected by them, potentially myself included, so I'm not being flippant about that, but let's face it, that's the reality of the situation. So I'm not here to be a jerk and say, haha, AI is taking people's jobs. I'm not, generally speaking, that pro-AI where I want it to take people's jobs, especially mine. So that's not where I'm coming from. But nonetheless, it's a reality. I mean, companies that are producing TV commercials, for example, would rather spend, as per this tweet, $500 to produce a 60-second spot rather than spend $500,000. And indeed, if you can create a functionally identical commercial for $500 versus $500,000, you're going to do it as a corporation. That's inevitable. That's going to happen, I think. And people are extending that to all sorts of other media, shows, movies, etc. And yeah, I mean, a lot of that is going to be AI generated. And that is going to put a lot of people out of work, and it is going to create other problems where we as viewers, we as consumers won't know necessarily what's real and what's not. And we might even go down some Black Mirror-esque road where AI generated people become superstars and are worshipped and idolized by the masses. All sorts of weird stuff like that. And it's not that I think it doesn't need to be talked about or shouldn't be talked about. It absolutely should be. And these are issues we have to confront. But I think people are missing the real scary part. That's not 5 years down the road or necessarily 10 years down the road, although maybe with the progress that the space has been making. But let's take those numbers and assume that nowadays, or maybe a year or two from now, you can make a 60-second live action commercial for $500 versus $500,000. It's 1,000 times cheaper. AI hardware, AI software only becomes more powerful and more efficient as time goes on. I think we could safely make that assumption that will continue. So 5 years from now, doing that same thing might only cost $50 in AI credits. 10 years from now, that may only cost 50 cents. 15 years from now, it may cost half a penny to generate a 60-second commercial that appears to be live action, is completely ingenuous to the viewer. That's frightening because a giant corporation isn't going to spend half a penny to make a commercial. They're going to still spend $500,000 to make millions of commercials. And that in of itself is not necessarily terrible, because I could picture a day where I'm scrolling through social media and I see a commercial for a new car, and the new car is driving through my neighborhood in the commercial, and the narrator is talking about the benefits of that car as compared to a Jeep Wrangler, which I happen to own, and why their car is better than my car specifically, and using big data sources, why I might prefer, me specifically, Scott, would prefer that new car to my current vehicle. In other words, extremely tailored ads made for each individual. And we already see that with text-based ads, stuff like that. So that's not scary. And maybe scary is the wrong word. But what worries me is when that same thing starts happening on Netflix. Like, why wouldn't Netflix analyze my viewing habits and the shows that I watch and the things I maybe watch for a few minutes and turn off and they can infer I didn't like? And why wouldn't they AI generate a show or movie specifically for me, specifically tailored to my interests and preferences? Of course they would, if it was cheap enough. And I think one day it will be cheap enough to do that. In fact, to generate a TV show or movie in real time, it will be generating as I watch it. And this way, if I turn it off, I don't like it, didn't cost them anything more to generate the rest of that. And it's gone forever. That was a piece of media just made for me that no one else will ever see, that won't exist anymore. Does anyone think that's not going to happen? And YouTube, same thing, with perhaps a different mechanism. There's already tons of AI slop on YouTube. But what about when it's not necessarily slop? When it's very specifically created and curated and targeted so that one entity, one corporation, one person might put out 1,000 variations of the same video, but that exactly target certain people's interests. Like they might put out videos over here that I personally hate, but their videos over here might be exactly what I'm looking for. And forget thousands, they could put out millions of them so that everyone has a certain video or set of videos that they want to watch. And the YouTube algorithm will pick up on that and continue recommending videos to each individual person that precisely suit their tastes. And what I'm talking about in the end is an echo chamber of one, where every single person has their own echo chamber, where every single person consumes their own media tailored for them, sees their own commercials tailored for them, maybe even sees their own news tailored exactly for them. I don't want to get political, that's not what this video is about, but political divisiveness is definitely an issue and something we all see and deal with in our daily lives. Well, imagine if there just wasn't right and left-leaning media, in the mass media anyway. What if there was media tailored specifically to your political interests and your political leanings? And I'm not talking about fake stuff. I'm not talking about stuff that's made up from whole cloth. I'm talking about reputable news organizations creating feeds for each individual user that has a talking head, maybe even multiple people on a panel, presenting their views on current issues that are real issues, but they're presenting these views in a way that's specifically tailored to you, not to anyone else. So if I go to, and I don't even want to mention a news outlet, because this is a general thing, if I go to the news outlet's app on my phone, it'll just be a live feed of talking heads that only I will see. But if you go to that same app, you'll see a live news feed that'll be tailored specifically to you. And that's where it kind of gets frightening, because like I said, echo chamber of one, where your own actions online contribute to big data and AI algorithms take that and feed back to you what they think you want to see. But it's original content. It's stuff you haven't seen before. It's not just like recommending like, oh, you might like this meme or you might like this video that's already existed around for 10 years on YouTube. No, we're talking about brand new media that only you will have seen and that you really can't talk to anyone else about. You can't go to your friends and say, hey, you see that new show on Netflix? Yeah, that's great, right? No, they wouldn't have seen it because it would have only existed for you. When you talk about current events, you'll say, oh, well, I was watching the news and they said this, that, and the other thing. And your friend will be like, no, they didn't say that. They said this, that, and this other thing. And you'll be like, well, no. So imagine that the level of political divisiveness we have now, but it's not just right-left. It's not just black and white. It's every single shade. Everyone has their own bucket, and no one can agree on anything. And look, I don't want to tread trodden ground here in that I know echo chambers exist nowadays. They can be a major problem when they're full of misinformation or problematic information, or where people focus on very specific information to the detriment of a larger truth. We all know that. That exists. But at the very least, in that situation, we have humans interacting with humans. They might all have the same delusion, but at least it's a shared delusion. At least there's some social interaction. At least there's some possibility of change, of that group morphing based on interpersonal interactions. But what if that didn't exist? What if there were no interpersonal interactions? It was just you in a room by yourself, talking to yourself for years at a time. That's frightening. And I don't want to say that we as humans won't have shared experiences anymore. Of course we will. You'll still go out to eat with your friends. You'll still go to play sports. You'll still do all sorts of stuff in real life that you do now. It's just that in our private time, when we're consuming media by ourselves, that media will be unique to us, and we can't share that experience with anyone. And this might be a no shit sort of thing, but based on the computers behind me, you might have guessed I'm not a huge sports fan. I've never been a sports guy. But the more I think about it, the more sports is like the one truth that we all share. We all know who won the Super Bowl. There's no argument about that. We all know who won last night's game, whatever sport you're talking about. That's unambiguous. There was a score that happened, that was published. Now, people can argue and say, oh, the ref should have made that call. Oh, if our star player wasn't out on injury, we would have won that game. Yeah, of course, people will have those arguments. But the truth, the outcome, is still the outcome. And it's something that people don't really debate. Like, I'm starting to really see the value of things like live sports and live events where people can share an experience where it's definitely not AI generated. It's definitely not something that didn't happen. It's definitely something we can all talk about. And I think we're going to lose that. I don't want to say mark my words, but here's my theory. When we start to see more and more AI generated content tailored more and more towards very narrow demographics, even down to individual users, and we simultaneously see a drop-off in the viewership of live sports across the board, across all sports, that's when we're in real trouble. That's when we know that people are falling so far down their own personal rabbit hole that we no longer have shared experiences on a large scale as a culture. Like, when you meet a stranger, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about the weather, I guess, because we're going to have nothing left to talk about that we have in common. That's the part that frightens me, because we've been through a lot of this stuff. The Industrial Revolution, people said factory automation is going to put so many people out of work, it's going to destroy civilization, it's going to destroy society. And yes, it hurt a lot of people. A lot of people were out of jobs. A lot of people had to adapt, and some people did not, or did not have the opportunity to adapt. And it was very painful for a lot of people. And it was a painful period. But we got through that. We're out the other side. And I think most people would say that we're better off for it. When the internet came out, or when the internet started really entering the cultural zeitgeist in the late 90s, people talked about the death of society. People won't go outside anymore. Everything's going to be done online. No one's ever going to talk to anyone else. It's going to destroy culture, blah, blah, blah. And we got through that. We came out the other side different for it, for sure. I mean, it definitely made a lot of big changes, culturally, societally, whatever. But the world still carries on. We still have problems. We still have good things. We still have bad things. The world carries on. AI-generated content in of itself, yes, it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause changes in industries. It's going to cause changes in culture. That in of itself, I think we can get through. It's just that dystopian, and maybe it's because I was raised on science fiction, but that dystopian nugget of eventually each of us being in our own mental pod, separated from our fellow human beings culturally, that's might be insurmountable. Then again, maybe not, because humans are adaptable. Humans actually tend to do very well when our backs are against the wall and we're faced with a existential or significant problem. I'm not really that much of an optimist in general, but I'm not a pessimist either. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think we'll get through this, but I do think that's something that needs to be talked about, is that narrowing of the echo chamber, and eventually it getting so narrow that it's just you in there by yourself, essentially talking to yourself. For most people, that would seem to be the definition of madness. Am I going to refuse to watch a movie that's completely AI generated? No. And years ago, there are some people who would have said they refused to watch a movie that's entirely computer generated, with human VFX artists working behind the scenes. Yet, there's tons of those now, and they do quite well commercially. And some of those are even seen to have artistic merit behind them. Now, I don't want to get bogged down in the argument of, can AI-generated content be art in the first place, or can it not? I'll put it this way. There was a time when photography came out, and people said that's going to be the death of painting, that's going to be the death of drawing, that's going to be the death of those industries that art, those artisans. And in fact, yeah, a lot of them were put out of work, and those same people were saying photography can't be art. photographs can't be art. They're just a image of what happened in real life. They're documentary at best. Well, nowadays we do consider some photographs to be art, or at least have artistic merits to them. Is it going to be the same thing with AI generated content? I don't know, because it is an apples to oranges comparison in a sense, in that at least there was a human taking that picture, processing that picture, tweaking that picture, getting the exposure just right, etc. But then again, you could say, well, with AI generated content, there's someone behind the scenes refining the prompt, adding to the prompt, changing things to suit their vision. I'm not trying to make the argument that AI generated content will be art or should be art, but I'm also saying that I allow for the possibility that some of it will be considered art in the future, even if we fight against it now. And that's why I think that's not the dangerous area. Because there's plenty of media that's produced right now that is pretty definitively not art. I mean, like, are you going to say Sharknado was art just because it was made by humans and put down on some kind of medium? No. And just like the Industrial Revolution led to mass-produced goods that everyone can buy that are identical and really have no art or artisanship to them, nowadays we can still buy bespoke, handmade goods. They're more expensive. That's why people don't buy them in mass. And if people did, they would just make a factory to produce them. But they still exist. You know, the Industrial Revolution didn't kill art, didn't kill artisanship entirely. It may have damaged it. So everyone wringing their hands right now over AI art and ownership rights and people being put out of work, those are all valid concerns. And like I said at the beginning, those are things we should be talking about. Those are things that we should come together and discuss, because human interaction, even if it's online, is important, and that's something we shouldn't lose. So these debates are important, and I expect a lot of comments, if this video gets any traction at all, to vitriolically disagree with everything I said in this video, and that's fine. And that's at least humans arguing with humans. Well, there will be some bots down there for sure, but I'm not here trying to adjudicate that anyway. But I am here to give my opinion on what might be a warning for the future of what we really need to focus on and really need to avoid. And that is the narrowing of culture down to the individual. And even that statement alone has plenty of wiggle room and plenty of space for argument. But I'll leave it there. Anyway, thanks for watching my rant. I'm out of here. Got to go create the prompts to make fake Scott before the next video. Bye.